So I think vibrator sales are about to go through the roof.
I kind of wonder if that hasn't been the case since 2020 started, and then this would actually not be as an exceptional a rise as you would think otherwise.
Yeah, that's been the most, it's been the joke that's made, like the glimmer of light in an otherwise bleak situation.
It's the one flash of humor to try to survive parsing the rest of it.
Yes. Yeah. So, as this episode will be released, it'll have been 6 or 7 days since the leak. I as we record this, I heard about it last night on, of all places, TikTok, and I was like, this could be fake news, or it could be real. It wasn't, it was like one of those things where it's like, who knows? And then I saw a friend of mine sent a message, and his sentiments were very much, he's like, I hope this destroys the sentiments where I hope this destroys the Republican Party, and I hope Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in a terrible place right now because she should have retired very early on into Obama's second administration. So, just the politicization or the ongoing oh my God, I can't believe
It's a bit of a tongue twister anay. Politicization.
It's like politicization. It's almost as bad as rural juror.
Yeah.
Anyway, the game of politics surrounding this medical issue for the past 50 years has been, I was a kid, as growing up. I grew up in a conservative household, Southern Baptist household, and I remember thinking, I got everything from the pro-life angle, and I got all of that rhetoric, and I get, it's not an entirely illogical position. It's just a relatively uninformed position.
Well, I agree, but I would almost call it more of a misguided position.
Oh, I think that's a better way. Honestly, that's a more gracious way. It is a misguided position. But the problem here is that there's a small group of people who have taken a medical issue that was otherwise applauded when the decision was made in the early 70s. Just so that there's no complete clarity at this point, because I feel like I haven't intentionally danced around the topic, but it is the leak of a document that was drafted in February that reads such that it will overturn Roe versus Wade on the federal level, allowing the states to make the decisions they want to about medical abortion. And for the past 40 years, my whole lifetime, it's been used by the Christian right I think the majority of pro-life, those who have the pro-life position, legitimately believe in that position. But it was started by a small group of people that were starting a culture war, and its ties go into money. It's money related. It's so and we've talked about that before on this show, and I'm actually started seeing people post more and more stuff about it. Like I had a couple of sources over the past 15 years that I would quote, and now I'm seeing more and more sources quoting other sources about the monetary motivation to use medical abortion to galvanize the Christian right. And I'll just repeat a couple of things I've said before, but in 1971, 74, and 76, the Southern Baptist Convention, and at the time the largest evangelical group in the United States wrote resolutions. In 71, it was in favor of legislation that allowed medical abortion. In 74 and 76, it was there were resolutions confirming their position on that. And they took they made a 180 in the early 80s during the first Reagan campaign. So,
yeah, I know I've seen a handful of different things, and I didn't keep any of it notated or where I could easily pull it back up, but a couple of things surrounding this that are interesting. So one is specifically the document itself that was leaked and some of the oddities surrounding that, and one is a lot of information debunking the whole non-monetary angle, basically. There was a very well-written post, and I wish I had it in front of me now, but it was really short, and it was basically saying, stating a one-sentence summary of the pro-life argument, and following that it was actually quite the contrary. If you trace history, that was not the initial outrage as far as Roe versus Wade, that decision. It wasn't until well after that the pro-life arguments started coming about, and it was a direct response to fundraising, lobbying, etc. I may try to find that, but just because it was interesting to see, and I have no fact-checking on it or anything either. It was just a comment that looked like it could be interesting to follow that thread, and so I will at least put it out there as something that if you want to research, great. If not, I will consider doing so. I may or may not follow up on that one, though. The piece that I thought was more interesting was the nature of the document, the draft opinion that was leaked. And a couple of things that I did not know about the way opinions are drafted and issued, or decisions are drafted and issued, as far as just basic workings of the Supreme Court. So just for the sake of clarity and to understand why there's still a certain amount of, I'm going to say confusion about what the potential outcome may be, even though we're fairly certain what the outcome may be, are these facts. And so you have a set of justices. You're going to have a majority and a minority on an opinion, right? It's the whole nature of odd numbers and why the Supreme Court is comprised of the way it's comprised of.
Yeah.
The majority group, so whichever decision contains the majority, the senior most justice of that group can either themselves write the opinion or designate someone to write the opinion. In the event that it's fairly political and along the party lines that we're expecting, that would mean Clarence Thomas would be the senior one on the majority vote. And he's already signaled his desire to overturn Roe. We talked about that some time ago as well.
Yeah.
So theoretically, it would be him writing the actual opinion, and given his desire to see it through and just general desire for his name being out there.
He's motivated.
Yeah, like it wouldn't make sense for his opinion not to be the one that was released, whatever he wrote. That said, it doesn't mean that the opinion will be any different. It just might mean the language is less direct and hostile. Maybe. Maybe not.
Wait, what does that mean?
The way Alito's position was written was fairly harsh, fairly abrasive.
Okay.
I was just saying that if Thomas writes the official piece, it may be tamed a bit on language. I find it doubtful, yeah, but still. But either way, it doesn't change what, in general, we think the forthcoming decision will be. Everything has signaled a trajectory along this path up to this point. So it would be surprising if the general position of the opinion that was leaked is not the final position as well.
Right.
That said, taking all of the kind of fluff out of the arguments and just focusing on what exactly that means, on the one hand, I can understand why you would want this to be a state decision. Because the way, as misguided as it can be in many instances, it should technically be up to the states unless there is a federal reason to intervene, which would be conveyed upon the federal government by either act of Congress with regard to laws that would be applied across all states, or something that is in direct defiance of the Constitution, which would be where the Supreme Court comes into play. Technically, you should say all branches of government, but they're whatever.
The power struggles have been what they were, and we are where we are.
Right. So part of me can at least understand from a foundation of government moving forward why this could be viewed as a state issue. Where I find that argument to fall short, though, is that isn't a direct, I'm trying not to use the word attack, even though that's the main thing that comes to mind, a direct line of action that harms a significant number of the population across state lines. Isn't that the very definition of what should have federal protection or involvement?
Yes, absolutely. You could even say you would expect a large group of multiple regions where half of the population will be affected by this. There's also the idea that there's this is an issue where there's so many ways to approach this argument, and one of them being is that I've seen some people talking about how the Constitution doesn't cover women's rights, and I was like, well, it also doesn't cover rights for former slaves. It doesn't cover rights for a whole group. I mean, it basically covers rights for white men. So, how is this?
That seems to be a fairly narrow interpretation of what the Constitution covers when you consider that the amendments are part of the Constitution. So,
well, yeah, right. So there are amendments. Okay,
right. But where this gets lost is a lot of people point to the Constitution as the original singular document pre-amendment.
And you have to include all of the amendments.
Yes.
Because they are amendments to the Constitution. Hey, we forgot about women's, we didn't include women's right to vote. Oh, we should do that now. We'll go ahead and add that on. That's fair. That's a fair argument. So I'm happy to skate on by this argument and go to the next one.
That's fine. It's the only reason I even mention it, though.
No, I appreciate it. It's not an argument worth wasting time on.
Well, and it's something that it's like cherry picking Bible verses. You either take the entire thing and understand context, or you don't. There is no in between.
That's such a lovely way of putting that. So it's also like cherry picking the science.
Yes. And
using the parts that fit your narrative or your worldview. So there's a whole medical science angle that can be taken on this, and I've not heard one single pro-life person articulate a holistic medical science position that supports the pro-life position. There's a social aspect of this where you see tons of people saying, well, why don't we just have people adopt those babies? I'm like, how many people have adopted babies? There's far more people that have a pro-life position that have never adopted any child. And so it feels very hypocritical.
I'd like to add one other piece to that is how many children are still awaiting adoption?
Oh, right?
I mean, there's a point where a certain number of children will never be adopted.
That's right.
They will eventually just age out of the system, and
they'll be adults.
Hopefully, they land in some functioning area.
I mean, at least we have a good education system in place that will help them get placed into good vocations or schools and for higher education and so forth. But until they get to that point, oh wait. After 18 years and you age out of this system, there is none of that for you.
Right. So the main pro-life argument tends to be around this concept of the sanctity of life, right? I mean, that's really all the argument comes down to, is that everything should be allowed to live.
Everything?
Well, hold on. If you're pro-life, you're pro-life. Period. Right? Or are we going to make distinctions here?
Well, are we?
So, as far as I'm concerned, for you to legitimately be pro-life, you have to also legitimately be against the harming of life.
So how do you define life, Jesse?
In any way, shape, fashion, or form.
How do you define life, Jesse?
Let's start with everyone's favorite, cockroach. If you've ever intentionally sought out and squashed a cockroach, I don't take your pro-life stance seriously.
Well, what about just human life?
Okay. So then we can make it some distinctions. I can allow that argument. It's just that we have this pro-life category, and it's hypocritical in and of itself if you're not also anti-harm. Because you can't make a case that something should be left to form and bring and come to life outside the body, outside the womb. In this case, a human. You can't argue that an embryo has to be carried full term to delivery without also being someone who doesn't want to see anyone else harmed. Because arguing it on that black and white of a position doesn't take into account anything about the situation surrounding that mother and child, or mother and embryo to be child.
I'm okay with you calling it a child. That's fine. Like I'm not gonna, there's this whole level of arguments. Well, it's a baby. And I was like, okay, it's a baby. We want to medically abort this baby. It's
a to-be child. I mean, in assuming that it is brought full term, or mostly full term.
Here's the thing: we don't issue Social Security numbers to unborn children. We don't issue. I'm not. If a pregnancy ends through spontaneous abortion, so I prefer that term over miscarriage, because miscarriage, I feel like, is a little bit, it takes away from the fact that abortions happen spontaneously. There are naturally occurring abortions, and there are medical abortions, and I don't want to separate those two ideas, because it feels like using the term miscarriage sort of takes away from what's actually happening. So when a spontaneous abortion happens, we don't, there's no, not that I'm aware of, there's no insurance company that's going to pay out. I don't think you can get an insurance coverage for, like term life on an unborn child. I don't think they allow for that.
No, but with what limited research I've done into like life insurance from children, it's not possible until after they have a Social Security number.
Right. So there's all these things where the unborn child is not recognized by the state, except for the idea that we want to terminate this pregnancy, or that the mother wants to terminate the pregnancy. And it's horribly not ironic, but you said the word just a moment ago.
Hypocritical?
Yes, thank you. Hypocritical.
I had to think through what I said.
Yeah. It's horribly hypocritical.
I think there are two big things that really encapsulate my issues with the abortion arguments in general. One, if you really truly believe that abortion should be restricted in such a narrow timeline, or completely outlawed, whatever extreme version of it that you want to claim should exist, why are you not also attempting to educate people on things before they get to this point, or provide guidance and medical care prior to this point? Why aren't you actually looking at the foundational problem and instead treating the last possible symptom?
Well, it's because in this country, I think fundamentally, like the deep down reason that this is the case is that in this country, we don't value women. We don't like women. We don't value women. And so we want to control their bodies. We want to slut shame them. We want to go through all manner of preventing them from succeeding in a system. It's a society where we don't value or like women, and I think ultimately that's why.
And was this 2-3 episodes ago where this was first brought in?
I think so.
I agree with the theory. I do think it's more. I think it's broader, and I know I mentioned this when we first brought it up as well. I just don't think it's isolated to women. I do think women are a category there, but I think it's broader than that. I think it's more driven from a position of privilege and a sense of entitlement, where anything that threatens to change the status quo should be controlled and tempered and tamed. And it just so happens that most of that is coming from either women or people of color.
Yeah.
And I don't want to blur it too much, because I think there's a very strong focus on controlling women that's also driven from historically strict religious upbringings as well.
Yes.
So there are other factors that conspire to play against women more so than other groups necessarily. But I do think that the same general pervasive fundamental problem is that problem. It's just that women are having to succumb to that issue for political reasons, for sociological reasons, societal reasons, religious reasons. There's a culminating or a cumulative effect there that isn't quite as cumulative across all of the same things for other groups as well. So it's a long way of explaining the rationale behind why I agree with what you're saying. I just don't think it's just that either.
No, it's never just one thing. It's never. I mean, I think when as
I was meaning focusing on just women as the don't like or want to control,
right,
etc. Yeah.
I think that's one of the core issues here. Another core issue is that this comes down to, this is a culture war. There, something that has shifted in the past 40 years is maybe even less than 40. No, maybe it's been in our lifetime. We've seen Christianity go from a position of meekness to, gun-toting rogues, gun-toting rogues. Yeah, that's what it was. I was trying to remember the name of that book, Going Rogue.
Yeah, I would certainly say that's part of it. I think there's another part of it too that we often forget about or don't put as much attention on, which is the entrenchment of the political elite as well. And
yes.
even in many of those representatives' areas or the places they represent, their regions, their districts, etc., public opinion is overwhelmingly in favor of the Roe versus Wade decision.
Yes.
And yet
it's on the line.
Yeah.
Like, if you look back at the last 50 years, because Roe versus Wade will be it'll have been 50. Is it 50 years next year? Or are we at? Yeah, we're at 50. Yeah, 50 years next year when that decision was made. And in the past 50 years, there have been 16 years. We've had a Democratic president for 16 of those 50 years, and that's not a majority, but that's plenty of time to have codified the law. But the fundraising is just too damn good when we're at risk of losing it. Like the fundraising for the Democratic Party goes through the roof at any point in time where we're concerned that a Republican Congress might, make a tax, or red states are trying to pass laws that infringe upon the rights that we receive federally because of Roe versus Wade. So there's just too much money to be made. And I think, I think I told you this. My first thought when I saw this news was, why did this leak happen? What is it that they're trying to distract us from right now? And the answers the few things that have answered the question is like, well, midterm elections are right around the corner. The housing market's not doing great. Inflation is awful. And Russia is still in Ukraine. It's a lot of different things. And if we can, the leak is like a great distraction from all of those things.
I've seen a couple of things written about that actually, where you can make some guesses and form seemingly cohesive thoughts around the motive behind it, depending on your political leaning as well. So you could look at the distraction aspect, but you could also look at the gaining attention and popularity for different reasons on the other side of the fence too.
If Biden if the Biden administration leads a charge to codify Roe versus Wade, then it's like, oh, hey, yeah, we'll vote for Democrats. They did something good.
Yeah. The not to take us off on a tangent, but just one quick little thing, because I thought about it when you mentioned Russia still being in Ukraine. There are also rumors that Russia may be targeting Moldova and Sweden as well.
Sweden?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how things play out. If
that's not good.
Yeah. So nothing confirmed there. I don't want to. I don't want to pretend that there's insider info or anything. It's just I've seen some rumors. I don't know how legitimate they are. I've got to do some research myself. But things could be escalating in the Russian conflict before too long. And back to the topic at hand. I put it there so that if I say it, I'll remember to at least try to do some follow up on it. I'm still honestly at such a loss at trying to wrap my head around how much of a political ideology push seems to be guiding everything lately.
Yeah.
Like, I get political ideology pushing a couple of things, or being a dominant talking point for a little bit, but we're going on years of nothing driving us forward except political ideology. And forward, obviously, not necessarily being a progressive statement, but just a literal, like, moving forward through time statement.
I mean, with the exception of daylight savings time, yeah. But I'm trying to think back, as like, when did political ideologies not drive the narrative? Like, has that been a thing in our lifetime?
I see. This is going to.
I think it's more overt right now, or it just seems more in the face. I feel like, when Trump started campaigning, and just the Trump shit show bandwagon, that makes it feel more in your face, because he was a more in your face kind of political candidate and president. But
I would say it precedes that as well.
I can't think of a time when it hasn't been the case. Like, when
the rise of Fox News is something that I would say coincides with it being more overt and in your face. And prior to that, it was a bit more, not tame, not toned down, a bit more restricted to specific topics, and other topics were left in the domain of their respective areas.
Well, journalistic integrity has waned significantly in the past 20 years. But I don't even think in our lifetime we've seen the kind of news reporting that I've heard about. Like, I think it's gotten, I don't want to say exponentially worse, but it hasn't been. It's not been exactly the rate at which it's gotten worse has not been exactly linear. But I don't think we've experienced the true. How am I trying to say this? There's always been something as soon as corporations took over the airwaves, or as soon as corporations, corporations have always had control over the airwaves. There's never been a form
I think
of
this
news
is.
that's not.
I think this is where we're both struggling a bit. It's not so much that political motivations have ever been non-existent. It's that you could generally see political motivations and social motivations and other areas like educational attainment motivations. Like, it wasn't. You could typically see and identify what is driving this particular position forward, or what is bringing this position to bear, and what is the argument rooted in. And we've reached a point where you can almost answer the question about where does this argument come from? Oh, it's a GOP conspiracy theory, or oh, it's a GOP talking point that like 10% believe, or it's a GOP majority view, or it's a Democrat minority view, or it's a Democrat conspiracy theory. Like, it's more that everything seems to be wrapped up in either political affiliation or misinformation. Is that maybe a better way to think of how the presentation of information has changed? It's not that the information is guided by a drastically better or drastically worse source. I mean, you could make the case, I guess, that conspiracy theories are drastically worse, but honestly, I mean, conspiracy theories have been around for a long time as well. It's just they're becoming more mainstream, which is problematic.
Well, I think the combination of them becoming more mainstream and just the onslaught of misinformation, the level of misinformation that is swirling about us is I will say that's exponentially increased over the past 6-7 years.
Yes, I would agree for sure there.
10 and I think that might be one of one of the things that has made a huge difference here. It has further polarized us. It has allowed for conspiracy theories to, like, the more ridiculous conspiracy theories take a greater hold on a larger part of the population.
Thinking back to you mentioned the first thought on the release of the leak of the document being the motivations behind it, etc. I'm also reminded that in order to promote either misinformation or disinformation, often you actually leverage something that's legitimate information. It just isn't necessarily what it is that is general consensus, right? So what I mean by that is
twisting the truth is a lot easier to swallow than a bald-faced lie.
Right. And it gives you an ability to pivot to other things that are less readily accepted, but if you have this concept of a shared belief or philosophy on this other thing, even if it's less readily accepted, you're more likely to at least listen to it. So the more devious side of this could also be an attempt to manipulate public opinion, if you want to look at it as devious from perspective of government. But you could also look at it as being more devious from the perspective of the people, and attempt to manipulate the court's opinion as a result of outrage and outcry. I'm not so sure either of those would be discounted, and they're certainly not mutually exclusive. You could like it for both reasons, for the whole point of sowing discord and seeing what comes out of it. There's just so much to unpack there, in addition to the trajectory of what events this sets in motion. Like there's one specific argument and case study here about the reason for leaking and how that can impact things that is of interest and intriguing to follow, that is completely unrelated to the ramifications of, if this is the opinion, what does life look like post-opinion?
Well, I tell you, statistically, we're not expecting the rate of abortion to decrease, but we do expect the rate of death from this procedure to increase.
Yeah, I would also wager there'd be increases in poverty and potential drug use and addiction and homelessness.
Yeah, that's what follows.
And yet we're concerned about the children.
I mean, as long as a few shows ago I read why the unborn is such an easy group to advocate for, and yeah, they are. They don't bother anybody. As soon as they're born, they cease to exist, and now they're a different problem. They're a problem we don't care about. So our society doesn't.
Yeah, they're a problem that groups of people will argue they care about. So verbally they care, but I have yet to see any action by those groups that they care.
Right. For me, like, the words people say are very important. Talking is very important. But for most people, your actions. What did you do about it? I don't see a ton of churches talking about why this is bad. I don't know any churches that have a program that help women in this situation. And you know what? Sometimes it's this, we're not always talking about like the 20-year-old mom who is trying to make it by. Sometimes we're just talking about like not even, I don't want to say a family. We could be talking about somebody who already has a family and they're just not ready for it to grow anymore. Like, It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think the big thing that I want to kind of bring it back to, who typically argues the pro-life argument? If you were to name a demographic, who argues the pro-life argument? It'd be people of faith, Christians generally. I don't know that I've ever heard other religious groups latch on to the pro-life argument en masse. I'm not going to say they don't, but in everything that I have been exposed to, Christians argue pro-life.
Well, Jesse, 80% of this country is Christian.
Yes. And I want to issue a very blunt challenge there. The challenge of a actual follower of Christ is not to judge or to attempt to control other people. It is to be supportive of them, to love them, to show empathy, to aid them, to clothe them. Nowhere, and I cannot stress this enough, nowhere does it say anything about telling another person what they can and can't do. You don't get to pass that judgment. And if you think you do, you are absolutely not a Christian.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.